Whoever first said all good things must come to an end, I really don't like that person today.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. My name is JJ Jackson. Thank you so much for being here with us today on Monday, February 10th, 2025. Locked On Blue Devils is your one-stop shop where we discuss everything going on in the life of Duke athletics. We talk a whole lot about Duke basketball, and that's going to be the focus here today as the Blue Devils are coming off their first loss in ACC play of the season at the hands of the Clemson Tigers over the weekend. We always say that all good things must come to an end, and that really upsets me because, man, that's true. Duke's 16-game winning streak, the longest winning streak in the entire country, came to an end over the weekend, and we've got to dive into the results with our good pal Kevin Connelly from Ball Durham. He's going to join us throughout the course of today's show. If you have not done so already, please be sure to follow and subscribe to Locked On Blue Devils for free wherever it is that you get your podcast. Go ahead and make sure that you leave us a 5-star rating and written review. Really do appreciate that. It was fun giving some 5-star Friday shout-outs on Friday's episode. I want to be able to do that this upcoming week as well. So do us a favor. Leave us a 5-star rating and written review, and we can give you a shout-out coming up on Friday. Also, you can watch our show each and every day over on YouTube. Really excited to continue to see the growth of our YouTube channel. We're getting closer to 3,000 subscribers. I know I've been saying that for quite some time. Really think we're going to get there before March Madness and can't wait to celebrate that milestone with all of you guys. So continue spreading the word about Locked On Blue Devils. Again, the only daily Duke Athletics podcast that is here and available for you each and every day. Proudly a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So 77-71, the final score for Duke's game against Clemson. Many people thought, hey, if this is going to be the game that Duke slips up and loses, it's going to be this Clemson one. And sure enough, all of them were correct. So let's dive into the loss with our good pal Kevin Connelly from over at Ball Durham. And Kevin, we're not used to this feeling. You and I were doing reaction episodes immediately following the Kansas and Kentucky games back in November. Now here we are doing a Clemson reaction, and man, it's been quite some time since we've had to break down a loss.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me a little bit of that Wake Forest game where you had a pretty good first half, you come out flat in the second half, and then against Wake Forest, Duke is able to rally and eventually win the game. But in this case, they're able to rally, but then not able to get over that hump fully in the final minute of the game after taking a 1-point lead. So, I know people say, oh, a loss could be a good thing. I think it was, I don't want to say easy. Duke was still close to a 6-point favorite. And I mentioned this on your show a couple times. Those favorites lose all the time in college basketball, especially on the road. I mean, you saw Auburn was a double-digit home favorite, and they got blitzed at home against Florida. So things happen in college basketball, right? Teams lose. But I'm not necessarily in the boat of a loss is a good thing. But they lost. It happens. You would feel like enormous pressure on yourself if you'd enter the ACC or NCAA tournament on a 25-game winning streak. So, and it was a game Clemson needed to have, right? They have hopes of making the NCAA tournament. They're coming off of an Elite Eight appearance last year, had a terrible loss earlier in the week against Georgia Tech, probably looking ahead too much to this Duke game and got clipped in triple overtime against the Yellow Jackets. So, you lost. You pick up your boots, you move on, and you get ready for the games coming up this week.
Yeah, now an even bigger turnaround for Clemson, a quick turnaround, I should say, as they play North Carolina a little bit later tonight there in Littlejohn. So talking about this game, though, from the Duke side of things, watching it unfold, like you mentioned, in that first half, Tyrese Proctor immediately came to play. He scores a season-high 23 points in the game. I believe he had 16 of those in the first half. A big reason why Duke was able to get out in front early. Connelly was locked in from the jump as well. Both those guys knocked down 4 3-point shots. I talked about it on Friday's show, but Duke had been 16-0 in every single game this year that Connelly made 2 3-point jumpers. He made his 2 3-point shots immediately, and you're feeling pretty good. You're like, all right, if these trends continue, Duke's going to be in a really good spot. That was not the case. So For the first time this season, you have Knippel making multiple three-point shots, and Duke suffers a loss. But I thought offensively, to your point, talking about that first half for Duke, there were some positive signs that were there in a tough environment. It wasn't like Duke put themselves in this crazy big hole. In fact, Clemson did not take the lead until later in the second half. Duke was the aggressor early, which is what they needed to do to pick up the win. So talking to that first half specifically, that was one of the more positive things, is that Duke's offense was kind of ready to go right from the jump.
Yeah, 41 points in the first half, and specifically in the first half, and even greater as a whole. It's kind of a shame Duke wasted this performance from Tyrese Proctor, because I thought it was his best game of the season. I mean, he was sensational. When Duke needed buckets in the first 35 minutes of the game, he was the one to provide it. Hit timely threes, I thought, in the first half. Once Clemson settled into the game and tried to make a little bit of a run, he was there to hit a couple of threes, hit a couple of big threes in the second half as well. The one in front of the Duke bench, I think, with about 4 minutes to go, probably the biggest one as they were coming back in the game. Yeah. So I thought Tyrese Proctor played really well. I thought he was probably the best all-around player in this game for Duke. Obviously, it was Cooper Flagg late, trying to get this team over the finish line and pick up a victory. But I thought Tyrese Proctor was great. As you mentioned, Knippel, I thought he was pretty good as well. It was just, surprisingly, it felt like on the insides, that's where Duke was kind of exploited in this game. Kaman Malawach did not play well. Malik Brown didn't have that same impact that he normally has, because Clemson has the big guy in the middle, and you thought Malawach would be able to combat him a little bit, but obviously he got the much better of the Duke freshman throughout this game.
Yeah, and then in the front court, you only have 2 minutes out of Pat Gamba for the Duke basketball team. We should mention no Mason Gillis over the weekend, so that's 2 consecutive games that he has been out with illness. Hopefully he's able to return here soon, and there hasn't been that great of an impact in terms of conditioning and that sort of thing. Anytime you've been sick like this, that's kind of the one thing that you point to. But Gillis feels like a guy that Duke really could have used, just from a guy that's been there before. He was so pivotal in that Wake Forest game, and we've been talking about the similarities between the two games. Difference, Duke won against Wake Forest, lost here against Clemson, but I really liked that in that second half, Duke had kind of that super senior player in Mason Gillis to settle them in a little bit on the defensive end, and able to be there to knock down some big shots offensively too.
No, definitely. And I think against Syracuse, when he didn't play, we all looked towards Isaiah Evans, and he was able to deliver in that game with a couple of made shots, even in the first half. And then kind of a non-factor in this game, did have the three-pointer, I think, when Duke went down 6 or 8 around the 9-minute mark, I think it was. And one of the possessions coming out of the Duke timeout, he hit a three-pointer, but that was his only made shot of the game and didn't really play an impact further down the stretch. So still a learning curve for Isaiah Evans, playing some meaningful minutes in a big-time game like this. But I think that's what you have to look at this game as a learning experience for everybody on the entire team, and a chance now to bounce back over these next couple of weeks.
Offensively, Clemson couldn't miss at stretches in this game. I mean, the field goal percentage, we'll talk about it here in just a moment. It was the best shooting performance another team has had from the floor so far against Duke this season. A couple of other teams have made more three-point shots and whatnot, but Clemson really efficient. When they put the ball up towards the rim, they were going in. When they needed timely offensive rebounds, they were getting those rebounds and so much more. We'll dive a little bit further into the box score after we take our first break here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. Locked On Blue Devils is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. The Super Bowl has come and gone yesterday with the Eagles winning the Super Bowl 59 championship. So now we're focused on the NBA with our friends over at FanDuel. You can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can always stay in on the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I certainly love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it makes every moment of the game exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for a late-game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three, I feel like I never missed my chance with FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA and a proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils. All right, we'll keep this show rolling. JJ Jackson alongside my pal Kevin Connelly from over at Ball Durham. We're talking about the Duke basketball game against Clemson over the weekend. The Blue Devils fall 77-71, and Clemson offensively could not miss. 59% shooting from the floor, 40% from three-point range, just 4 of 10, though, from the outside. So really not taking a whole lot of shots from three-point range. Duke has certainly faced teams who made more threes throughout the course of the year. But in two-point territory, they couldn't miss, Kevin, and it made it difficult because that means every time down the floor late in this game for Duke, they felt more of a pressure to go down and knock these shots in because, man, offensively, Clemson was really in a rhythm.
Yeah, you look at that 2-point field goal percentage and 26 of 41 from 2-point range. That's something special. And then, as you mentioned, I mean, they didn't put up a high volume of threes, but when they did, they made them shooting 4 of 10. And felt like the best thing for Duke to do at a certain point was put this team on the free throw line, because that was the one thing they struggled with during the game, only shooting about 60% from the line. But they were ready for this game. They were juiced up. And we know that when Clemson it has a competitive team, it's a really difficult place to play on the road. I think Duke just got in too big of a lull to start that second half, and they weren't able to respond like they did against Wake Forest. Any good thought we had about Caleb Foster coming out of the Syracuse game obviously didn't matter because he only played 3 minutes, missed all 3 shots. I think they were all on one possession.
Yeah, that was a tough sequence for him.
Yeah. He missed the layup and then tried to tap it back up and in 2 times and missed both of those. So I think it's tough to say. I don't want to pile on too much, but I mean, I think it's almost a lost cause for him at this season. You can't go into a game expecting anything from him. If you get something from him, that's great. That just adds the cherry on top of what you're already doing. But you can't go into a game saying we need 8 to 10 points from Caleb Foster because, I mean, he's not even getting on the floor that much to provide you those minutes. And I think it also kind of underscores how important Cooper Flagg is. I mean, he was kind of a non-factor through the first 34 minutes of this game. And then he came alive late and obviously battling through some stuff. I feel like a lot of people thought that going back to the NC State game where kind of looked winded. I'm trying to think who missed the NC State game with an illness. Oh, that was when Malawach kind of got sick on the court.
Yes.
And a lot of people thought, oh, maybe he's dealing with some type of illness. And John Shire was like, no, he just had way too much Gatorade during one of the timeouts went back on the floor. But obviously it felt like there is at now this point something going on through the Duke locker room with Mason Gillis now missing 2 games with an illness. We'll see if he's able to come back this week. And Cooper Flagg kind of hinting at after the game, and I think John Shire even said it on the ACC teleconference today, that he does have some type of cold or flu or virus that's going on. He was cramping late in the game. Obviously, he slips on the wet spot with Duke down 2 in the final 30 seconds or so. That's obviously the biggest play of the game that a lot of people are going to point to. Duke didn't lose the game because of that, but kind of you can't really compare that turnover with the turnovers at the end of the Kentucky and Kansas game because they're 2 separate things, right? In the Kentucky and Kansas game, you credit the defense, but Cooper Flagg kind of dribbled in to those turnovers. I mean, he didn't really get to make a play here. I mean, driving to the basket and his feet just slip out from under him because of the wet spot on the floor. They said it was a hot day down in South Carolina, obviously a sold-out gym where everyone's on top of you. Condensation comes on the floor, and you hope the people that are in charge of mopping up those wet spots under the basket are doing their job, but obviously they missed this one little spot on the floor, and unfortunately it came at the biggest point of the game, and Cooper Flagg slips, and it's a turnover, and Clemson salts the game away at the free throw line right after that. So there was a bad possession for Duke before that when Sion James gets blocked at the rim. That was when it was 72-71. Cooper Flagg gave Duke the lead 71-70 with a 3-pointer when he just caught fire.
A money shot. I mean,
at the end of the game. That was I tweeted it out on Ball Durham. That was like a no, yes shot from Cooper Flagg. It was like, you can't be settling for that shot and it goes in. You're like, oh, okay, that's a great shot. Great shot. So Yeah, I think there are some positives to take away, but also it kind of the spotlight gets brought back a little bit higher when a team loses. And it shows you that this team does need Cooper Flagg for a full 40 minutes. It needs a good Tyrese Proctor. It needs Con Knippel. It needs Common Malawach to provide you something. Fouling out in 20 minutes, only getting 3 points and 5 rebounds. When you look on the other side, and Clemson's big has 22 points. So
Yep.
Duke needs some production out of Malawach going forward in that center position.
We talk so much about, going into the game, and anybody that's scouting Clemson, it's not going to change. When you scout Clemson, Chase Hunter and Ian Shefflin are going to be the two names to be on the lookout for. But Victor Locken was a big reason why Clemson was able to win this basketball game. He couldn't miss. He was a force on the inside, finishing with those 22 points on 9 of 12 shooting from the floor to go along with those 4 rebounds. His performance is noteworthy. And then, Kevin, I kind of look at the other numbers that jump out at this. We mentioned the percentage that Clemson shot. They did turn the basketball over 12 times, so turned it over more than Duke, showing that, hey, if Duke takes care of the basketball a little bit better on their end, and then just contests better and has Clemson miss a few more shots here and there, they're going to be in a much better spot, because obviously Duke won the turnover battle in that regard. But the numbers that do jump out, 36-23, Clemson dominating Duke on the boards, winning that rebounding battle. And then on the inside, Duke really hasn't been beat up like this. If you look on our screen, we've got the box score up for those watching us on YouTube. Clemson had 40 points in the paint, Duke just 22. One of the biggest discrepancies against Duke that we've seen all season long in that area.
Yeah, and that goes back to my last point with Malawach. I mean, you need something from him. When you have a 7'2" guy with a 7'6" wingspan, manning the paint in the middle, you can't give up 40 points to a team on the inside and only score 22. You can't get out rebounded by 13 on the road and expect to win. So Duke needed something inside from Malawach or Brown, and they really didn't get it. And both battled foul trouble. And I think you can say that's kind of where the game was lost for Duke.
All right, so Duke now has to figure out, where do we go from here? What's next? How do we move on? How can we start to play better? All of these various things are going to be the big questions that they're going to talk about, and we'll start to answer those questions after we take one more break here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. Stay with us. Thank you so much for making Locked On Blue Devils your first listen and first watch here today. For your second listen, you got to make sure that you go and check out the Locked On ACC podcast. Alex Dono and Kenton Gibbs keep it real and bring you the truth about where your favorite ACC team stands within the conference. You can find Locked On ACC on YouTube or wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. Remember, each and every Thursday, we have the Locked On ACC Squad Show, where so many of our hosts within the conference get together, banter back and forth. They're going to let us hear it this week about the Duke loss against Clemson, but that's A-okay. Make sure you go check out Locked On ACC, wherever it is that you get your podcasts, and over on YouTube. Okay, we're getting set for the final few moments here on this episode of Locked On Blue Devils. I'm JJ Jackson, joined today by Kevin Connelly from over at Ball Durham. Duke was the number 2 team in the entire country. You mentioned it a little bit earlier. Auburn was number 1. Auburn had the second longest winning streak to Duke's 16 games. They both lost. Duke, of course, wins head-to-head there. I think it's like Akron right now has the longest winning streak in the entire country. So shout out to the Zips, Kevin, for what they're doing there in college basketball. But now Auburn has stayed number 1. Alabama is number 2. Both of those teams will play this upcoming weekend. So you will have 1 versus 2 coming up on Saturday in college basketball. And then Duke is tied for 3rd with Florida, who just beat Auburn. So it'll be number 3 Duke taking on Cal this Wednesday, and then they take on Stanford coming up on Saturday. Both games inside Cameron Indoor. So they played 2 games this week away from Cameron. Now they've got 2 games this upcoming week here at Cameron. What's it going to take to bounce back, Kevin?
Well, you have to throw the record books out the window when you play the long-standing rivalry in the ACC against Cal and Stanford. So when you play those historic ACC programs,
kidding, anything can happen, man.
Yeah. No, let's a little bit more realistic. And it's kind of interesting. You play these 2 games in Cameron And then after Saturday afternoon in Cameron, you don't play in Cameron again until March 1st because you go on the road for a couple of ACC games. Then you have the game up in New York at Madison Square Garden. Against Cal, I'm kind of expecting a big bounce back performance. I think the guards will play well. I think Cooper Flagg will play well. I think Duke should comfortably win probably 10 to 15 points or more. I'm really interested in the Stanford game, right? I know Jalen Blake's former Duke guy coming back. Feel like he'll get a big ovation just because a lot of people in the Duke fan base still like him, plus that buzzer-beating overtime win. Not overtime, regulation win. Against Carolina. Feels like he should get a pretty big ovation for that.
He's got a Duke degree, a part of the brotherhood forever, man.
Exactly. But the one thing I'm really looking forward to this week, and it kind of goes hand in hand what we just talked about, how Duke lost against Clemson. And really the biggest thing was the lack of presence on the inside with Kevin Connelly and Malik Brown. Max Reynaud, I think that's how you say his name, for Stanford, was entered the transfer portal actually this offseason. Figured he would have been one of the most sought-after players in the country. Elected to take his name out of the transfer portal and go back for Stanford. He is a load to handle on the inside. 7'1", about 250 pounds. He is a senior. He has a ton of experience, a little bit of weight on Kevin Connelly, averaging about 21 and 12 this season. So how Duke defends him Saturday, I think, is going to be really interesting and fascinating. So that's kind of the biggest thing I'm looking at, to how Duke responds this week after the loss. And kind of Saturday, little unique, right? I mean, Duke plays on ESPN. They play on these national broadcasts, but this is a true nationally televised game playing at 4 o'clock on ABC against Stanford in Cameron. So that's a little bit of a unique flair to this game as well. And I think it's a big-time matchup inside, looking at Reynaud trying to match up against the Duke front court.
Without a doubt, that's certainly going to be something to be on the lookout for. From the Cal perspective, the game earlier in the week, Peja Stojakovic, a longtime NBA player. So many people remember him from his three-point shooting ability with all those Sacramento Kings teams. His son, Andre Stojakovic, is a part of the Cal team. He was recruited by Duke. There were moments where maybe this guy's going to end up playing for the Duke Blue Devils. He played at Stanford last year. Now he's transferred to Cal. He's playing for them this year. You got to go out there and you got to play these games. I think in order for Duke to bounce back, though, it's a matter of forgetting everything that happened against Clemson and playing your game. And that seems like the most elementary and easy thing to say in order to hype a team back up and get them back into it. But I believe it, Kevin, because what we've seen from this Duke team and looking at their opponents this upcoming week, Duke is still the best team in the ACC, and you can't let there be a carryover effect from a loss like Saturday against Clemson.
No, 100%. And not to say that there's pressure on this Duke team, but now Clemson does have the head-to-head tiebreaker over Duke. It's the only matchup they play in the regular season. And Clemson's only one game back now in the ACC regular season standings. You look at Cal, not impressed with them, although they are getting better from where they were. I will give them that. But recently struggled with Miami despite winning in overtime. Lost at home to Syracuse, coming off a loss right now at home to Wake Forest, and then traveling east here from California to North Carolina to play Duke. I assume they'll probably get the Tar Heels later in the week, just with try to make it easier on the schedule or something like that. I don't have their schedule in front of me, but you figure they're playing 2 games here on the road this week. So like I said, I do expect Duke to emerge victorious in both games this week. I am, though, probably looking forward a little bit more to the interesting matchup against Stanford and how Duke's going to try to combat their size inside.
What are you expecting out of Cooper Flagg this week? So many people talking about him following Saturday's game, just 4 points through the first 30-plus minutes of the game, then really stepped it up like we talked about down the stretch, was battling the cramping a little bit, sick, it appears. What can we expect from him, you think?
Well, I think the biggest thing is you hope that he's healthy, right?
Yeah.
Because it does seem like he has been dealing with this illness or whatever going back to the NC State game. And maybe that's not true. I wouldn't say struggled against Syracuse, but certainly didn't seem as aggressive. And John Shire kind of said that this illness or whatever you want to call it has affected some of his preparation going into these games. So I think the first thing you want to see, is he going to be aggressive? Is he going to be attacking from the opening tip to kind of show you that he is healthy and now and fully recovered and ready to go for the stretch run? But he's the best player in the country. I expect him to bounce back. I don't think he pays too much of attention to social media. I think social media trying to just pile on to him for slipping late. But like I said earlier in the show, you really can't compare the turnover against Clemson to the turnovers late in the game against Kentucky or Kansas, just because they were two completely different scenarios. You can compare Kentucky and Kansas. You can certainly compare those two turnovers, but the one in Clemson isn't even in the same category just because it was a wet spot that forced him to turn it over.
Excited to see Duke play a little bit later this week, again on Wednesday against Cal, and then Saturday taking on Stanford. A couple of games coming up inside Cameron Indoor. Hopefully Duke can protect home court like they had all season long. All right, Kevin, tell us about your website.
Well, Ball Durham, we got everything you could possibly want on Duke basketball. That's the best way you could come support us. Read us every day over at balldurham.com. Follow us on social media at ball_Durham.
Great to see you as always, Kevin. We'll talk again soon, okay?
Can't wait, JJ.
All right, that's Kevin Connelly joining us here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. Always do appreciate his time, thoughts, and insight. And Duke's going to be all right. We're going to bounce back from this thing, still have an ACC to continue to dominate throughout the course of the season. And the best part, we still have those national championship goals right there in front of us with this Duke basketball team. That'll do it for today's show. As always, go Duke. I'll talk to you tomorrow. My name is JJ Jackson. Thank you and good day.